On UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
Any item that comes before the committee. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comments from the podium here in the center of the room. Please come forward to the microphone at that time and you'll be recognized. And for the best recording and broadcast purposes, we ask that everyone speak as directly as possible into a microphone during the meeting. Roll call, please.
Roll call: Walters. Here. Murguia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. Thank you. There were no revisions to the agenda after it was originally published, so our next item of business is approval of standing committee minutes from our October 1st meeting. Move for approval. Second. There's a motion and a second to approve those minutes as submitted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved as submitted. That takes us to our committee agenda. Both items on our committee agenda tonight are land bank business, and so I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Slaughter.
Thank you. Good evening. We'll get right into it. We have 4 applications tonight. We have 1 single-family construction and 3 yard extensions. And as we do every month, all applicants are current on their taxes and have no code violations. So the first is 2109 South 26th Street. This will be a single-family construction. We will note that the applicant is planning to build a 1,200 square foot first floor and 1,200 square foot basement. This isn't obviously the actual house, but this is just kind of a rendering of what they plan the end result will look like. And then we got 3 yard extensions. The applicant lives here at 3118 North 47th. And they're looking for 3110 North 47th. This house has been demoed. 1520 Pacific Avenue is another house that has been demoed, and the applicant is there at 1518 Pacific. And then the applicant here is at 1522 North 59th with the land bank property at 1600 North 59th. The advisory board did review and recommends approval, and that is our ask for tonight.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Slaughter on any of these properties?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve these 4 applications as submitted. Any further comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call: Walters. Aye. Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Okay, and the last item we have is the update of the rehab program. Currently, we're sitting at 86 contractors. We have 99 houses in our inventory, 19 recommended for demo, 72 currently in the rehab program. Of those, 33 have rehab started, 3 houses we're waiting to close, 36 with no offers, and of the 99, 8 are the last ones we just got deeded over from the August tax sale, so we're in the process boarding, inspect them, and then we should have open houses scheduled before the end of the month. Currently, we've had 22 houses completed rehabs in the program. That's 16 this year, and 19 houses demoed, which is 15, and we've had 2 more completed. This is 1869 North 30th Street. This was a donation from, I believe, Wells Fargo. The rehab took 6.5 months. In January of this year, it was appraised at $46,800, and it's currently listed for sale for $119,000. And then 2735 North 31st, again, this was another donation. This took 12 months. Back in January, it was just about $39,600 appraised, and it's currently listed at $81,000. So shortly and sweetly, that's the presentation tonight, unless you have any questions or comments.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for Mr. Slaughter on the rehab program? We appreciate your monthly updates. Always look forward to them because they're good.
Thank you.
That concludes all of the items on the neighborhood and community development agenda, so we will adjourn in that capacity. If anyone was here for an item on the land bank agenda, those items were all approved as submitted, and you can follow up with Mr. Slaughter. Otherwise, we'll take just a moment here to get BPU Board Member Bryant at the table, and we will convene the Economic Development and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Chairman.
Have two committee members on the phone joining us this evening. I will now call the meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into a microphone. Roll call, please. Clerk will call the roll.
Roll call. Bryant?
Here.
Walters? Murguia?
Here.
Townsend?
Here.
McKiernan?
Here?
Burrows?
Here. We do have one revision on tonight's agenda. Item number 7 is a resolution adopting the First Amendment to the Legends West Lawn Development Agreement. At this next point, we have the minutes from the October 1st meeting. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve as submitted.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, minutes have been approved. Yes, sir. Yes, I do have it. Yes. You can look at this one. This is my copy. Take a look at that one. Okay, and we'll get you a copy of that too. Okay. Will be our third quarter budget revisions. This is for information only. So at this particular time, I would recognize Mr. Lindsay, I believe, will be doing the presentation this evening. Mr. Lindsay, the floor is yours.
All right. Good evening, everyone. What we have today is the third quarter budget revision report. We had one budget revision from the police department for stun guns. And basically what we usually do is if we have departments and they want to shift $10,000 or more or request $10,000 from contingency, we send a request to the county administrator's office to sign off on it before we shift the funds. In this case, the police department requested shift funds within their department to purchase stun guns for $14,000.
Any questions?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you.
Item number 2, Kathleen Von Etchen, our Chief Financial Officer, is here this evening. I understand that you will both be tag teaming us this evening to do the presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. You have the floor.
So I'm going to talk about revenues, and my budget director, Reginald Lindsay, is going to talk about the expenditures. Overall, the consolidated general fund includes the city and the county and the parks general funds together. And this evening's presentation is to discuss the budgetary performance through the third quarter of the 2018, which takes us through September 30th. What you have here is a budget column for last year as a comparison, and then this current fiscal year, 2018. You can see that we budgeted revenues of $212 million in the consolidated general fund, and so far this year we've collected $172 million, or $173 million, which comprises 81% of the total budget. The third quarter denotes that basically if revenues were collected evenly throughout the year, that we would only have 75%. So it looks like we have more revenues coming in than we anticipated. But that's not necessarily the case, because you have to keep in mind that property tax payments are, for the most part, paid. About 98% of all the property tax payments are already collected through the third quarter. There aren't any property tax payments collected in the fourth quarter. So in other words, the revenues aren't necessarily coming in on an even stream. There is some seasonality to that. The expenditures totaled $213 million. We have spent so far $151 million. That comprises 70% of the total budget. So that's a little lower than the 75% target at this point in the year. As a result, we have because we have higher revenues than anticipated and lower expenditures than anticipated, our fund balance grows from $25.7 million to $48.5 million. And that's through the third quarter. When we get to the second quarters, where a lot of these revenues, well, there's a little bit more spending that happens at year end, not to mention the fact that we pretty much have captured all the property tax revenues we're going to be collecting. Of course, sales tax will continue to flow in at the same rate as what we collected in the prior year for this period. So overall, things are looking pretty good. Now I'm going to provide you a little information on the revenues, more detail. So I'm going to talk about the city general fund and then the county general fund revenues. So as you can see, the property tax, sales tax and other taxes are the largest revenue source for the city general fund. City general fund revenues are budgeted to total $147 million, and of those amounts, 101.2% of the property tax has been collected thus far. So what that denotes is that basically the assumption that I made for delinquency may have been maybe a little bit too conservative. So because if it were dead on, it'd be 100% right now. So we'll see how the end of the year looks, but it's very positive news. Sales tax is at 72%. If we were through third quarter, you would expect that number to be at least 75%. I've looked at prior years, and basically sales tax collections tend to be greater in the fourth quarter of the year because of Christmas and not school, getting you back to school, but for the most part Christmas. So it's looking pretty good. We're at 77% on the city revenue side. And the chart actually shows the prior year compared, which is the blue. Yeah, compared with the current period. So you can see how most of the revenues, well, property tax is above the amount collected last year, but all of the other revenues, many of the other revenues are a little bit below. For example, sales tax is a little bit below, and permits is a little bit below the amount we collected last year.
Kathleen, would you explain what the other tax is that you show up there, the third item down? What is that other tax category?
Yeah, it's a number of taxes, but for the most part, the largest one is the franchise tax, which is collected, and also the payment in lieu of tax from the BPU or the BPU pilot. So, but franchise taxes are not just electric and water, it's also sewer and cable and several other gas. There's quite a few of others.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on the county side, again, we got that property tax revenue number that's above 100% for the same reason as I mentioned on the city side. For the most part, the percentages look similar. 61 million is collected in revenues for the county general fund, and so far we've collected 55%, and that constitutes 91% of the total revenues we expect to receive in this fund. This fund is more reliant on property taxes because it doesn't have as diverse of a revenue. The revenue streams are not as diversified as on the city side. Okay, so now Reggie's going to talk about expenditures.
So here with the expenditures, we have two different views on the screen. We have budget to actuals, then we also have the year-over-year actual comparison, which is at the bottom chart on the screen. And one of the things, as Kathleen said, the rule of thumb here is we should have like 75% of the expenditure spent up. So as we move down into the city general fund, we can see with personnel, we got 73% of the budget left. We're like 1.7% under what we should have spent, which is a good thing. That equates to like $1.7 million that we're under budget leading up to the third quarter. So in the first line with personnel, some of the things paid from there are the salaries and the benefits and workers' comp. So right now we're trending below there. And then under there we have services. Some of the things we have paid from there are transit, trash contract, and we're running like 1% above the 75%. And then in supplies, we're like at 59%, so we're definitely above where we should be. And one of the reasons there is because this is where fuel is paid from, and fuel it was over what we had anticipated. We did have some contingency set aside for it, but the price went up, so it was over what we anticipated in the budget. And also we pay parts from there, and parts we have spent a little bit more money on also this year. So that's what we have going on there with the budget to actuals for the city general fund. If you compare it to 2017, we can kind of see some of the categories are up. Capital outlay is down out of the categories there in the 20s compared to the 2017 actuals. And one of the reasons is because the budget for capital was a little larger in 2017 than it was 2018, so that would kind of make up a little difference here. But in 2017, our personnel was lower. So what you see there, we have an increase in personnel for 2018 of what we spent compared to last year, of about $4.5 million. I'm going to move over to the city or the county general fund. And this is where we pay for all our county functions. And as on the city side, we have the same two views. We have a budget to actual comparison there at the top of the screen. And then at the bottom of the screen, we have a comparison between the third quarter last year of 2017 and 2018, which is this year. And the same rule of thumb applies where we should have spent 75% of the budget. And we can see personnel, we're below budget, which is a good thing. And again, this is where salaries are paid for, workers' comp and overtime are paid from here. Services, we're below 71%. And on the county side from the services, we have some big contracts over there that are paid from the sheriff's department, prisoner inmate housing, and prisoner inmate medical. And when I come back for the fourth quarter, they'll be a little bit up, just to let you all know. But right now, they were down when we were reporting the third quarter. Also supplies, as it was in the city general fund, is trending above. We spent a little more than 75%. This is due to the fuel again. What we budgeted for fuel did not come in. We had contingencies for the fuel, but just based on what we budgeted for the fuel and the cost and the price of gas is up. And if we look at the lower grid chart, where we're comparing 2017's third quarter to 2018's third quarter, we can kind of see where, compared to last year in services, we are up $757 million. And basically that category there, that's where our inmate medical is and our inmate housing. So this is what the sheriff pays, and we can kind of see that it's trending above what it was last year. So that's what that category tells us. And then again, as in capital, we spent a little less this year than what we spent last year, and the budget was also a little less last year. So, yes. The city general fund? The county? Or, all right. So the personnel expenses.
Total.
Yeah. Yes. So a big bulk of it is the personnel.
Yeah.
Big bulk of it is the personnel, and then the grants and claims. And one thing also in the grants and claims, this is where we pay we give a grant to the Parks Fund. So last year we did, at this point in time, we did not do it throughout the year. And this year we're doing it throughout the year, where last year we waited to the end of the year to do it. But this year we try to trend it. So what would happen?
Yeah, annually there's a $3.7 million transfer from the city general fund to the Parks Consolidated Fund. So like Reggie said, you know, in some years we just did it all at the end of the year, the whole 3.7, but now we're changing our accounting practices and doing it throughout, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Good catch.
Any other questions? Mr. Lindsay? We continue?
All righty.
Is there one more?
And so this slide right here is a view of all the other tax levy funds. So on one side you have the revenues, and then on one side you have the expenditures on the right side. And basically the funds that we didn't cover, as far as we covered the city general and the county general fund. These are all the other tax levy funds, and there's 9 of them that are covered here. And then also in the information that you all have, all funds outside the tax levy funds, there's 20 of them, and they're covered here. And again, we have the revenues on the left-hand side and the expenditures on the right-hand side. It's kind of the rule of thumb is everything should, at least on the expenditure side, we should be at like 75%. And on the revenue side, it's nice if we're over 75%, but not nice if we're over 75% on the budget side or the expenditures. Any questions on any of those?
Are there any questions from the committee? Are there any questions from the public? Seeing no questions at this time, appreciate the presentation. This is for information purposes only. So with that, we'll move on to item number 3, and that's the revision of the Unified Government Debt Fiscal Policy, or Financial Policy. And Kathleen Von Atchen, you're to make the presentation this evening, so the floor is yours.
All right, so I did want to remind all of you and the viewers that these quarterly financial reports, both the investment report and this budgetary performance report, are on our finance department website under financial reports. So, and all of them are up there from the past to the present. All right. So tonight I wanted to briefly talk about our debt portfolio, our debt, and how that relates to the debt policy. So right now, we have a debt policy that's about, real simple debt policy. It's about 4 pages long. We also have 2 other procedures which we include in the budget document related to the debt policy. One of the procedures talks about how we issue debt and how we decide to proceed with issuing debt. And then the second procedure has to do with the requirement, how do we fulfill the requirements as set aside by the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board and the Securities and Exchange Commission. So overall, we have 3 policies. And what I would like to do is to really make our debt policy, the core debt policy, a little bit more specific, and then also fold in the procedures with it, so it's all one package. Tonight, what I'm going to talk with you about is the kind of the ratio analysis from a white paper that I recently wrote. So that you can see how our debt compares with other communities. And then what I'm seeking from you tonight, actually, rather than really talking about the debt policy, and wordsmithing the various edits, or what I want to get is general strategic direction from you as to what kind of debt metrics you're looking for us to include. And then in the coming month, we will come back in January with an actual policy that's redlined with the revisions so for you to review and to talk about further. All right. So that just generally speaking, tonight, we're talking once again about our policies, and so I just wanted to revisit that the financial policies have a lot to do with our capital improvement plan and then with our long-range financial forecast. They all play a part. They cause us to answer questions and to spur discussion, but also to adopt resolutions for revising our policies. And so when we're looking at policies, we want to keep it at a high level with the principles directed at the strategic vision of the organization. But we're also looking to avoid costs and as a critical public policy discipline. And then also we would like to follow the recommendations of ICMA and GFOA. Those are my general views on policies and procedures. And we have done a wonderful job, thanks to all of you, in updating the rest of our financial policies. This is the last policy that I'm looking to update. So several weeks ago, I presented some information as a request from Commissioner Johnson and also Commissioner Walters about, and maybe McKiernan as well. There was a general consensus for, how does our debt portfolio compare with other cities? So it's difficult to really match or determine what the comparative cities are because each city is so unique. But generally speaking, what I did, having reviewed all the various cities, is I picked about 10 different cities that seem to have a similar makeup as ourselves. And so this table here summarizes that information. And the reason I'm bringing this up as part of the debt policy discussion is because these are generally the type of metrics that are used to judge whether a debt policy, whether your debt portfolio, how well you're performing, and it's actually they're really affordability metrics. So I'm going to go over this real carefully, and then I'm going to show you a graph for each of these metrics and how we compare. Now, this first column is the unified government, And then this is generally what our current policy goals are, not the goals that we hope to form as part of our future discussions. And then this is the median, and then this is the average of the 10 entities that I selected, which you'll see which entities they are here in the next slides. So then this is picking up which entity got the minimum and which got the maximum. Now, so some of these metrics, the minimum is good and the maximum is bad, but in others, the maximum is good and the minimum is bad. So you'll see. So now, generally speaking, S&P credit rating, GO, we have a AA from S&P. In our policy, we generally want to maintain our AA rating. There's not really a medium here, but for the most part, out of the 10, 3 have AAA and 3 have AA plus. And then, so on average, you know, on average, everyone has a AA. There's a AA, there's 3 AAs, there's 3 AA pluses. So on average, everyone's got a AA in this scenario. The lowest was a A plus, and then the highest was AA. Population, we have 165,000 population in the county. The median was 209. The average was 250. The lowest was city and county of Broomfield, Colorado, with 66. And the highest was Omaha, Nebraska, with 466. Now, I picked out 3 cities that are cities and counties in order to provide that element in our comparisons. So assessed value per capita is $8,160. The median is $19,000, and the average is $26,000. So we are the lowest amongst these 10 comparables, and Omaha, Nebraska has the highest with $70,000. And the general obligation debt as a percentage of assessed value, we're at 22%, and the average is around 3 and 4%. Now, the debt carrying costs as a percentage of total governmental expenditures is basically whether we can afford our debt. And ours is at 18, and S&P has us between, well, they recommend between 10 and 12%, and that's what these other entities are averaging. Governmental debt per capita at the unified government is $2,700, and the average for these entities is around $1,600. Overland Park has 540. Broomfield, because of its smaller size, has 4,000. Now, this is not really a metric per se, but just to give you a little context, I've listed the governmental debt outstanding. Generally, we have $458 million in general obligation debt outstanding. The policy is that we keep that amount below 30% of the assessed value. That's the policy direction set in statute. The other entities averaged $352 million, or the median was 352, the average was 379. And Omaha's the largest with 739, but they're quite a bit larger than we are in terms of population. The last item is that our fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, which is the general fund reserve, at the end of 17, we're at 21%. The new policy you adopted set us at 17%, and the median was 26%, and the average is 34%. So these metrics demonstrate that we have a little bit of, a little bit of work to do. It's very difficult to adjust these metrics in the short term. This is a long-term strategy because previous councils have committed to certain debt levels that we have to continue to maintain. And secondly, because increasing our assessed value or the value of our property is something that it takes years and years of investment and effort on the part of our economic development department and other entities of the unified government. Here's some graphs demonstrating some of these metrics. Assessed value per capita. The UG is the yellow one. You'll notice that the other Kansas entities, Topeka's also around 9,000. You know, we're at 8,000. Topeka's at 9,000. Wichita is at 99,700. So we're comparable with the other larger entities in our own state. One thing to consider when you're looking at these graphs is that every state has a different assessed value percentage. So this is not appraised value. Right now, we're assessing residential property in Kansas at 11.5% and commercial property at 25%. But those percentages are not necessarily what these other cities in other states are doing. So that's why it's a little complex to, it's a little difficult to make comparisons with other cities because of those nuances. But on the other hand, the debt that is being paid back, that the revenue generated from this assessed value is what's being pledged for the debt repayment. So it makes sense to use assessed value rather than appraised value. Here's the total governmental general obligation debt as a percentage of assessed value. There's that, we're at 22%, and there's the median. Topeka's at 13%. Wichita is at 6.5%. And all of these amounts come from the CAFRs, most recent CAFRs. This is the affordability table, and you can see that we're at 18%, but for the most part, everyone else is, you know, similar. We're a little higher. I mean, it basically, you know, what percentage of our total debt, governmental debt, what is the percentage of our total governmental debt payments annually made each year compared with the total amount of expenditures we have? Here's debt per capita. So that's here, Topeka's at 1,300 and Wichita is at 1,677, but we're at 277. And naturally, Wichita and Topeka are not counties, they're cities. So you have to keep that in mind. So so here's outstanding governmental debt. Of course, some of these cities are quite a bit larger than we are. So like Omaha, Nebraska is quite a bit larger than we are, and Cleveland, Ohio is, as well as Wichita, Kansas. So. And then we're doing pretty well here. Our reserve is at 21%, and the other cities in Kansas, and you know, we're pretty consistent with this set of cities here. So yeah, you've seen this graph before, but I just wanted to remind you historically that this is how our unrestricted fund balance and So back in February of 13, Moody's downgraded us from AA3 to A1. So we've now been for 3 years in a stable position at this A1 level, whereas Standard & Poor's has consistently kept us at the AA level. And of course, if we maintain our reserve policies, you know, and we don't get downgraded, then, well, that's definitely a policy or something that we want to avoid getting downgraded. But if we were to be upgraded by Moody's, we would save about $1 million for every $20 million or $15 million 20-year general obligation bond debt. We would save $1 million in interest. So, so what I'm looking from you is maybe I'm here to answer any questions you might have, but I also want to get some feedback from you on what kind of metric would you like to set as for this column here for the UG going forward to include in our policy.
Committee, questions?
Well, I'll start off. No, did I hear somebody trying?
Commissioner Townsend, was that?
No, that was me, Commissioner. This is Commissioner Murguia.
Okay, Commissioner Murguia?
So my question, Kathleen, is more what do you think we need to do? The presentation, you did a great job, but it doesn't really look great for our county, and I am concerned, as all the other commissioners have expressed, about our debt load. And as much as I'd like to know how we got here in more detail, I don't think that's going to solve anything. So I'd like to hear at some point after everybody else's questions are in, what do you think needs to happen to begin to turn this around and improve our debt load?
Well, so that's a difficult question because there's two things. Mainly, the main issue is that because of our community is aging, it's over 100 years old. The streets are needing repair. You know, there's a lot of different investments that need to take place. And I'm sure all of you are aware of that, of course, because you hear from your own residents, you know, every day. We need to make investments in our infrastructure. And in order to do that, we don't have sufficient, you know, cash on hand to make those significant investments. So that's where that debt, you know, issuing debt is a tool for us to proceed with that. But you know, this city has, or the unified government has been, is in the habit of issuing debt, GO debt, every year. And I think, personally, and I don't think this is going to be very popular, but I think we need to issue GO debt every other year. And we need to keep it, you know, at the $15 or $20 million mark every other year. That's where you're going to make some progress in keeping your debt load low, but still investing in the infrastructure needs that the community needs. So that's what I would recommend doing. And
okay, I have a follow-up question to that. So I hear what you're saying, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, am I accurate? I remember former County Administrator Dennis Hayes saying we have got to continue to grow our county in the way of growing our tax base by through business and residential economic development in order to bring in the revenue that we need to cover the costs like road repair and the things that you're referencing. So I have
I agree.
Okay, so every time something comes up that involves growing our county, whether it be, I don't know, Nebraska Furniture Mart or a speedway or something as simple as a fast food in Argentine, there is a lot of controversy because of the level of incentives that we give. And honestly, I've been around a long time, and what I've never really understood, and I would like someone like you to tell me, is there information out there, or when is the length of an incentive not growing the community anymore? Or how do you suggest we deal with that? Because until we figure out how we're going to grow our community. And obviously, it doesn't matter in Wyandotte County if you're out west or you're in the city, because we're giving incentives on both ends. So how much incentive, have you looked at our incentive packages, and do they seem reasonable in moving us in the right direction to grow our community and grow our tax base? Or are our incentives all messed up, and do we need to redo those? Because I hear what you're saying, but to me it's not helpful if you're just saying, hey, don't put this road on your credit card anymore. Well, it has to be fixed. So in the long run, then, if we're not going to do it this year or next year, then in the long run, how are we going to do that? And I'm assuming you're going to agree with me that that's through economic development, but then all we hear back is complaints that our incentives last too long, or some people have even said give away the farm.
So the Economic Development Department has 3 economic development policies, or two. One is the tax abatement policy. The other one is the economic development policy. And I know that our interim economic development director, Catherine, is going to be bringing forth some proposed revisions in the coming 6 months or so for you all to consider. Another thing that's happening in the future 6 months is in April, my staff and I are going to be presenting an update to the tax increment financing report. So we prepare a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that we gave to all of you as part of a special session last year. And so we're going to provide you an update on that, and it's going to analyze every TIF district that we have and how well it's performing based on 5 different metrics, which I can't remember offhand what they were, but we've provided that information in the past. We're also going to roll in the community improvement districts, which are CIDs, and the STAR districts, so that you can have a comprehensive view of how every one of these districts are performing. All of our districts are meeting debt service or close to, and are doing very well. The residential TIFs aren't doing so good, but they're older than 10 years, so we're looking to, but generally speaking, they're doing rather well. Generally, any kind of incentives or tax abatements, property tax abatements is what I think you're referring to. They last between 10 and 20 years, depending on each deal. So to talk about them in global terms is a little difficult because every deal is different. That whole discussion, I understand you might think it's very related to this, but because the AV, the assessed value, is one of the denominators in this scenario, but it is somewhat related, but not as closely as you would think. What we really need to think about is prioritize what capital investments are of the highest value to our unified government, and what is the lowest way to pay for them and to lower the cost. There is a benefit to doing debt financing because it spreads the cost of the improvement or the benefit that we're providing by the different investment in our infrastructure. It spreads it to future taxpayers, and so that it's not burdening entirely our current taxpayers. So there is a very careful mix that you need to do when you decide how much debt to undertake every year. What I'm saying is, because we have so many needs, it would make more sense, in my view, to proceed with issuing GO once every other year, and that gives our our Public Works Department time to fully complete the projects before we proceed with the next. So so anyway, that's part. It's a little bit of a staging. It also has to do with the level of debt. Minimizing the annual amount of debt that we add, and then making sure we can accomplish all the projects that we complete. So,
thank you, Kathleen. Any other comments from the committee? Questions from the committee?
Yeah, I still have a final comment, and then I'll stop. Kathleen, I'll just leave it with this. I hear what you're saying. There are lots of ways to manage debt, and I think you're doing a good job in trying to be as creative as possible. But I will say that as costs go up, we have to grow our community in order to be able to pay for those costs. It's pretty simple, and at a commission level, I don't know how much into the weeds we're really supposed to be with how we manage that debt. But I just know that in growing our community, I would like to see our CFO, more involved in helping us set good policies around economic development for our community. And that coupled with what our community wants to see in the way of economic development. I'm not sure that that's happening, or maybe I'm just not seeing it. I don't want to judge that because I don't always see what goes on up there. But I do think that that's very important, that we can manage and get more creative about how we're managing our debt. But if we're not growing our community, at some point we're not going to be able to pay what we need to pay for. And I just want to make sure that when the commissioners or when others are out there trying to bring business to Wyandotte County, that when we're looking at those deals, that we're looking at them not just in the short run, but in the long run, and what's in the best interest of our county. I'm done, Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Commissioner Murguia. Commissioner Townsend, do you have any comments?
I don't at this time, but I reserve, I guess, the right to ask some later. The presentation wasn't in the packet, so when I get a chance to review that, I may have some comments that I'll forward directly to Ms. Von Atchen.
Thank you, ladies. Does anyone from the public wish to address this item? Oh. Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Mr. Walters?
I think you asked Kathleen if we had any thoughts about which of these metrics are important. The one that kind of stands out to me is the one in the middle that says 10 to 12% of total governmental expenditures, and we're at more than that. And it says above policy goal. Is that our current policy goal?
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, we're not doing so well on that one, it doesn't sound like. And I don't remember in any of the budget presentations anybody from staff pointing out that if we approve this budget, we're going to be not in compliance with our goal. So that would be one that would be important to me. Mm-hmm. I certainly would like to hear what's important to you too. It sounds like you are suggesting that we need to cut our borrowing substantially by 50% or so. I've heard this $15 million number, and what does that pertain to? Is that the consolidated general fund? Is that there's the city fund, or what?
Okay, well, so we issue a lot of different debt. So
yes, we do.
When I talk with you, I'm really focusing on the general obligation bonded debt. Right?
City?
So that's city and a little bit of county as well.
A little bit of county.
But mainly city. All right.
Well, one of the challenges I have.
I'm actually not referring to the special obligation bonds or the STAR bonds or the CID bonds. Those are all economic development type bonds, mm-hmm. and the revenue from the individual project is paying for that debt service. So we don't typically include any of that in these discussions. What we're talking about tonight is just the bonds that are secured by the property tax levy of the city bonded interest fund and the county bonded interest fund. All right. So the city bonded interest fund, it has a 16 plus mill rate, and the county bonded interest fund has a 2 plus mill rate. So the combined, it's around 19 mills in total.
Well, that is one of the challenges I find is when we talk about debt, so many people have different numbers, and it could vary by hundreds of millions of dollars when somebody says, you know, what's the debt of the county or the city or the UG or whatever. So it would be good.
Yeah, there's also there's also the debt that we issue for our sewer,
Yes.
wastewater enterprise fund,
Yes.
and stormwater, which is paid for from
Taxpayers.
no, it's paid from ratepayers or people who benefit
Residents.
from the service. It's a charge for service.
Yes. Well, most of the debt does eventually get paid off by, you know, the residents of Wyandotte County in one way or another. So, and that would be one thing that I would find helpful is when we talk about debt, we be specific as to what we are talking about, and if it's $15 million, what that pertains to. And I hear you saying maybe we should cut that in half by doing it only every other year.
I was thinking maybe 20 to 25 million every other year.
It would be.
Just governmental general obligation debt.
So my request, I guess, is could we get a plan? Could you put together a plan for us as to how we could get to 10% of governmental expenditures within some period of time? If it's 10 years or 5 years or whatever, so that we could at least have a magnitude in mind of what that would actually do to us as commissioners when we approve and review the budget.
So, actually, S&P recommends that it be around 12. So how about 12? Would that work? Or you want 10?
If you want 12, we'll defer to you. So I guess those are two things. First, confirmation of just what we are talking about when we're talking about debt, and then secondly, a recovery plan to get to 12% of expenditures. And going back to what I think Commissioner Murguia was saying, was certainly it would help if we could grow the tax base. That would help us get to that 12%.
Absolutely.
Well, but we have been growing the tax base, and it hasn't helped us on our debt so far. It appears to me anyway. So I think maybe some corrective action might be in order. That's it for me.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Bryant?
So I'm going to kind of take a different angle, but dovetail on the last thing that was talked about, which would be, you know, in the comments was talking about how to grow the tax base, which is the only way you're going to continue to maintain and fix the infrastructure. We have the same issue at the BPU where, you know, how do you grow your revenue when you have limited streams? So, you know, there was talk about the tax abatement, and a lot of people don't realize that in most of the places where a tax abatement is given, it's going to be a business, a larger business that will still be paying the pilot fee, which the pilot fee is a significant amount and is based on their utility usage. So it's a larger business and it's probably going to have a larger portion of the pilot that they'll be paying. So there's still revenue coming in from this, even though they have that tax abatement for a while. And I think a lot of people forget about that revenue stream. But
yeah, and that pilot supports public safety expenditures reflected in the city and county general fund.
Yeah, I would hope that it represents a lot. I mean, it's a significant. I think this year it'll be a little over 32 million. So it's a significant revenue stream for the UG, and so I don't diss the UG for having that. I understand the purpose of it, and it's a fee that in lieu of a property tax, which some businesses especially have mitigated their costs of property tax for a period of time. The pilot is paid by all, so it's more of a fair share from all based on their usage.
I don't remember what percentage, but a good percentage of the total pilot revenues comes from commercial.
Yeah.
Much lower.
It's a significant.
Residential.
Residential is the smallest, I believe, the
Yeah.
smallest portion of it. Mine would be, instead of, the policy, which you guys are more into the policy, mine would be more of just suggesting kind of an idea that, when you think about it, it's going to be growing your revenue base. There's a couple weird ideas that I'll save, but one of them I would say is thinking about what is going to bring you the biggest bang for your buck. So basically your investment versus return. So who brings in the largest portion of your revenue to you? Is it going to be in industrial businesses, commercial businesses, or residential? And perhaps you target those as where your growth areas. I know that at times it's hard to come up with a plan, and you're trying to grow everything at once, but if you know that, for instance, commercial, and I don't know whether it is or not, but say commercial, businesses between a certain amount size are your largest revenue source per investment cost by the UG, then you target those areas and you say, okay, this is going to be our number one goal, is to try to draw more of these businesses because it's going to give us our largest revenue boost with our lowest expenditures. So, I mean, it's just, at times you have to sit down and just think about the simplest terms, and you're going to have your plans to grow the residential and everything else, but you just have to figure out what it is that's going to give you your biggest bang and go after that, and just see how it works.
Yeah, so I'm going to incorporate some language on encouraging efforts and action steps towards improving our revenue base or the value of our property in the policy. Yeah.
I know the mayor has stated specifically that to grow our revenue base, we have to continue to have economic development in our community. Commissioner McKiernan.
Just one comment I've made before, to talk about our total valuation is misleading, and this goes back to what Commissioner McGee was talking about. If we don't acknowledge that a certain portion of our valuation is not at any given time paying taxes because of the incentives given. So I think we need two figures, total valuation and total valuation that is paying tax.
Yeah. Very well stated, Commissioner. Very well stated. Well, there's been a number of ideas and suggestions floated around this evening. Grow our revenue-based tax abatements. I would just say that tax abatements are really appropriations of dollars that we are giving away, and in hopes of future income. So we need to be mindful of that. But one thing I can state, that this committee is really adamant about reducing debt, and we have studied our ways to do that. And I appreciate the ideas tonight. I look forward to your TIF presentation in April. I believe there's something to be learned from that. Your idea about issuing GO debt every other year, 15 to 20 million of debt every other year, that basically cuts our debt reduction in half right off of the bat by looking at that policy.
Well, 20 to 25, 2025 every other year.
Commissioner Walters.
One more request. Your financial policy that you brought forward a few months ago, it had 4 actions that we could take if we had a surplus. And one of them was reducing debt. So walk me through how that would work. We know the surplus in January or February, in round numbers at least, but we will only know that after the fiscal year is completed. So do you recommend or do you foresee having it in the future year's budget to reduce that debt as a sort of a line item, recognizing that we had the surplus in the previous year and we will now catch up by, if we choose to reduce debt, by including it in the future year's budget? Or just walk us through what that process would be.
Well, okay, so there in the policy that you adopted, there was a reference to 5 items that you can or possible proposed options for utilizing any excess, which the excess is amounts at year end that exceed the minimum benchmark of 17%, right? So if it was, those were to pay down outstanding long-term liabilities such as deficit positions in our workers' comp fund or the health benefits fund, or to pay down our pension liability or to save for pension payouts. Okay, so that's one of the things. The second one was to reduce our debt. Third one was to make an investment in some new program or for some specific cash-funded capital project. And then the third one was just to let it go to fund balance and build your fund balance so that we end up at 25%, not the 17 we're at, or where the policy was, right?
And there was also one cutting taxes.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. I knew I missed one. So the one was to reduce the mill rate, or you could reduce the sales tax rate too. But or the pilot.
Well, I guess I'm just focused on debt.
Okay, so the debt. So what we're going to do is that I'm thinking more the end of February we'll be able to get a good feel for how we're looking at the end of the fiscal year, because it takes us a couple months to close the books, right? So early March, I'm foreseeing us having a presentation made to, probably special session, or perhaps this committee, and to talk about how our fiscal year end looks, and then at that point we'll be providing you with a list of alternatives or suggestions for what we want to do, but. You're wondering which fiscal year would we hit. I'm thinking we probably would apply that difference to, it's really up to you whether we'd apply it as part of the amended current year budget or for the future year budget. It's really up to you. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And, yeah.
Again, just a reminder, this was for information purposes only, and I believe that information was well received this evening. So thank you, Kathleen. Was there any comments from the audience this evening? Let the record show no one stepped forward. So moving on to item 4, the next on the agenda this evening is the resolution of intent to issue IRBs in an amount not to exceed $4 million for the benefit of the PHVIF Kansas City LLC. And we'll give Kathleen Carter, our interim economic director, a few minutes to get seated and prepare. And then Ms. Carter, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Catherine Carter, good evening, interim director of economic development. So the Hilton Garden Inn, they are here with a resolution of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds for sales tax exemption for construction materials and FF&E. The industrial revenue bonds are in an amount not to exceed $4 million for the benefit of PHVIF Kansas City, which is really just Peachtree Group, who were the folks that purchased the Hilton Garden Inn back earlier this year. So the requested action for tonight is to adopt the resolution of intent and advance it to full commission on December 13th. Just a kind of quick reminder of kind of where this is. So this is the Hilton Garden Inn downtown at 540 Minnesota. We're in support especially of the renovations and things that they're kind of investment putting into this hotel, because I think it's going to do particularly well considering the benefits and the other things that we're kind of working on in the vicinity of this hotel. So of course the grocery store is directly across the street, or will be directly across the street. Also KU, who could potentially have folks coming in and needing a place to stay. They should be opening their new building, the Strawberry Hill campus, in August of 2019. So all of this could come together nicely for that purpose. That's what it looks like today. So as I mentioned, the Peachtree Hotel Group acquired the Hilton Garden Inn back in May of 2018. They immediately talked to us about their plans to invest in the entire property. So that includes public spaces, rooms and bathrooms, food and beverage spaces, restaurants, and the exterior. So as they're working through this incentive process, they are currently in the planning stages of the renovation, and their hope is that they would start first quarter of 2019, so pretty quick, which is excellent. Again, the requested action is to adopt the resolution of intent and advance. And I'm here also with Katie Logan from Lathrop and Gage, representing the applicant, if you all have any questions.
Committee, are there any questions? Mr. Walters?
In our packet, there was a document that is titled Notice of Intent to Enter into a Lease Agreement. Could you explain what that is? It's a unified government in connection with the proposed issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds hereby gives notice of its intent to enter into a lease agreement with PHVIF Kansas City.
So basically what happens with industrial revenue bonds is for a short period of time, we kind of, I think of the best way to describe this. So we're kind of giving them our sales tax exemption for the period of time that they are doing the renovations. So in effect, we are kind of becoming the owner of the property for that time and then kind of leasing back. If you can explain that.
Under Kansas law for economic development incentive bonds, that's what these are. This one does not require a property tax abatement. It is asking only for the sales tax exemption. But in order to obtain that, the structure of the transaction, these were prepared by Gilmore and Bell, your bond counsel. The structure of the transaction requires the property to be conveyed to the issuer, here the unified government, and then leased back to the company that is going to do the improvements. And when it's a sales tax exemption, usually the period of time the company buys its own bonds. These are not full faith and credit, general obligation bonds. During that period of time, the company owns the bonds, the city owns the property, leases it back to the company, typically for not more than a 2-year period, because the city only needs to have title to the property for purposes of the sales tax exemption for the period of time it takes to do the improvements. So typically it's a very short, term structure. And of course, all the costs relating to that are paid for by the company, not by the unified government.
So, how much sales tax are we foregoing?
I'm sorry? I didn't hear the question.
What's the total amount of sales tax that?
The amount, I understand that the amount of the sales tax savings that is being estimated on this project is somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000, because remember, the sales tax is only chargeable on the hard costs. Mm-hmm. And not all of those sales taxes would necessarily be coming to the unified government otherwise in any case.
Commissioner McGee.
So could I finish my sentence, my statement, or my question? I would like to ask Chief Legal Counsel to walk me through that. We're taking ownership of the Hilton Garden Inn?
Well, it is kind of a legal technicality that's required by the statute. This is what happens with all IRBs for that period of time while the bonds are outstanding. It's kind of a strange structure, but that's how all the IRBs are done. The municipality technically does this leaseback provision with the.
So you're fully informed on all this, and
yes,
but you're not of approval.
Yes.
So we will own the Hilton Garden Inn again for a short period of time, and then
technically, on paper, yes.
Well, how else do you own stuff?
But obviously it is not contemplated as a long-term ownership in any ways.
Okay, thank you.
Point of clarification. I want to make sure I heard correctly. We won't own the hotel. We'll own the furniture and the properties that are being purchased through tax exemption. Or are we going to own the entire entity during?
No, it is the property. Yeah.
It is the entire entity, and I would assume that as our attorney that we would ensure that the place is fully insured to cover our investment should a a tragedy or an incident happened at the facility.
Yes, we will.
Thank you. Commissioner McGee, you had a question?
Yeah, on the $250,000 to $300,000 that someone said was a savings in sales tax. Who gets that savings? Are you talking about the business or the unified government?
What happens is, this is Katie Logan, Lathrop and Gage, representing Peachtree. What happens is the city, which has its own sales tax exemption certificate as a public entity, then issues the company gets to use the benefit of the city's sales tax exemption certificate. So sales taxes that the company would otherwise have to pay without the sales tax exemption certificate are simply not collected.
So we're giving away So the unified government is giving away $250,000 to $300,000 in sales tax revenue to the hotel.
Effectively, however, the nice thing about the sales tax exemption is a lot of the sales tax is not, we would not be collecting, because in reality, with these type of large projects, the vast majority of the items are not actually being purchased in Wyandotte County, KCK. So wherever they are purchasing these items, it's that sales tax that we are able to exempt. And so whether they're a different state, a different city, so I'm sure some portion of that would have been purchased and will be purchased in Wyandotte County, but the likelihood is the vast majority will come from other jurisdictions.
So you have no idea how much sales tax we could potentially be losing in Wyandotte County on this?
At this time, we don't. We certainly get that in the long run and see where they purchased everything, but no, we do not at this time.
And then I just want to follow up on Commissioner Walters' question about the lease and owning the property for a while. I'd like to hear from someone about the worst case scenario. What is the worst case scenario of us taking ownership of this property that could happen?
I'm not sure that there would be a worst case scenario, because, I mean, really all the incentive is on the hotel to make good on its promises and pay off the bonds. Because what
if they don't? What if they don't? What happens?
Well, I think that, we would have the ability to, control the property until they do so. So really,
then we'd own the property again indefinitely, correct?
Indefinitely, or until the bonds are paid off. Ms. Logan, if you have.
Yeah, the way, again, this is structured this way because the Kansas statutes require it to be structured this way in order to have the benefit of the city's sales tax exemption. The company, the city, the UG will require the company to buy its own bonds. So in essence, the company is both its own lender and borrower. It owes itself the money. The company has no incentive to have the property remain in the UG's title, remain in the UG any longer than is necessary to obtain the sales tax exemption.
The hotel's collapsed.
So what is the UG getting? So what is the UG getting out of this in the end? What is the unified government getting?
What is it?
We're getting a much nicer hotel downtown and more investment in the downtown KCK that will hopefully bring more people to stay there eventually, and ideally shop more and kind of spread. We're just trying to get more people coming downtown and spending money.
Potentially more transient guest tax.
Yes, that as well. Yep.
Commissioner McGee, any other questions?
Nope.
Commissioner Townsend?
Yes, I do have a question along the lines of what I've been listening to with the lease agreement. What is the length of time, or what is the occurrence of the event that will conclude our status as owner of the hotel?
So you will be working with the city's bond counsel in drafting these documents. Typically, the term of the lease, the term of the whole transaction is a bit longer, building some cushion in, than the estimated construction period for the project. Now this isn't a new building or an addition to an existing building. This is, cosmetic improvements and significant, but cosmetic improvements to the inside of the hotel. I did not ask my client what the construction term is. I don't know.
About 6 months is what they're asking.
6 months. So my guess is, and I've worked with Gilmore and Bell a lot in other situations, my guess is that if it's a 6 months estimated construction period, then, the period of time that the city would hold title and the bonds would be outstanding wouldn't be longer than a year. And it, once the project's done, they can always be terminated earlier. So this would be a very short period of time.
Okay, 6 months to a year based on the completion of the construction. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McKiernan.
So, but don't I understand that this is the exact same legal arrangement that we have used in every single IRB we've issued over my entire time here? So this is nothing new that we're doing. It's the first time that I guess we've noticed it. But this is not some deviation from past practice, correct?
Yes, this is standard procedure.
Okay, so every IRB we've issued for every project, everywhere in this city, has gone through this same arrangement.
Correct.
And I want to just confirm one other thing in section 6 of the resolution, actually. Just to confirm, you've said this out loud, I just want to confirm this, that the issuance of these bonds shall not directly, indirectly, or contingently obligate the issuer, the state, or any other political subdivision thereof. Basically, we are not backstopping these in any way.
We're not.
No.
All right. And that is also consistent with the issuance of previous IRBs, correct?
That's
never backstop an IRB. All right. I move to approve the resolution as submitted.
Commissioner Walters
I did have just one simple question. While we own this building, will it be tax exempt from property taxes?
I don't. Due to the short length of the issuance, I don't think that'll even.
No, this is purely for sales tax exemption.
Right. Yeah, on
of construction materials.
Thank you.
I'd second the motion.
Okay. Motion has been seconded to approve the resolution. Action must be taken. Is there any comments from the public on this issue? Let the record show no one has come forward. I entertain the motion. All in roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Murguia?
No. And who's ever doing the roll needs to turn their mic on because I can't hear a thing they're saying.
Just a second. Commissioner, we're going to see if we can turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, Commissioner Burrows, just so you know, when you're on the phone and you're trying to call in, anybody that doesn't use their mic, I can't hear anything they're saying. So if I've interrupted anybody or whatever, stepped over someone, that's usually because their mic's not on. I apologize.
Everything's gone well, Commissioner.
Okay,
Great.
I'll start roll call over.
Roll call.
Bryant?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Murguia?
No.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye. Okay. That concludes item number 4. Now we'll move on to item number 5, which is a presentation of the proposed revisions to the Unified Government's cash and investment policies. And I do see our Director of Revenue and County Treasurer Rick McKessick making his way to the table. So Mr. McKessick, when you get seated and you're ready, the commission is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, Kathleen was going to lead the presentation of the slides this evening, but we are certainly here for questions.
Okay. Hi. We worked with our investment cash and investment advisory committee on some revisions to the cash and investment policy, and this policy is required to be updated or reviewed annually by state statute. So we've identified some minor adjustments to the policy. So the next two slides just briefly references some of these adjustments. In the packet, Rick and I have included, and Andrea, the three of us have included both a clean copy and a redline version. The revisions that we've included are to update the reference to our county treasurer, director of revenue and county treasurer. It wasn't quite correct in the policy. We also updated the reference to our municipal advisory firm. It was referred to previously as financial advisory firm, and that terminology was changed due to Dodd-Frank federal legislation. We are proposing to reduce the amount that any given insurer holds of the total portfolio from 30% to 25%. And the reason for that is that my goal is to diversify the portfolio even more so than it currently is. Right now, we're still having difficulty getting that percentage down to even the 30% level, mainly because we need to encourage more of our banks who have branches and locations here in Wyandotte County to take a more active part in our investment portfolio bidding process. So right now we're kind of get the same 2 or 3 banks bidding, and we need to get more of our other banks to be more involved in our portfolio. So.
And with that, Kathleen, we have I do know we have one insurer that has over our statutory limit already.
Yeah.
If we reduce this to 25, will that put any others in violation of,
No.
So we're well under the 25% with the other entities?
Yeah, that's
Financial
what I
institutions.
remember. Yeah.
I did want to mention that we have been looking at that one institution, and I believe off the top of my head that we probably will be in compliance again, definitely next year. I don't remember if it was a second quarter. Does that sound about? So we just have a 4-year period where those items mature and they're laddered out 4 years, and we are simply not investing any additional funds with that institution until, and as time passes, investments come off, it will bring that down, and then we will be in compliance with the policy again.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you say within the year, that's 2019, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that would just get you to the 30 though, right?
Well, I believe we will reach 25%
At that point.
fairly quickly as well. I don't anticipate this change making a substantial change to when that happens.
Thank you. Please continue.
We're also including some clarifying language on the importance of retaining the assets as liquid for those funds or idle funds that we're collecting on behalf of the other governmental entities as a result of the fact that we administer the property tax. So, you know, and we do, but it was just kind of rewording the phrase in the policy. We better defined our core investment portfolio so that it specifically excludes debt-related reserves and bond proceeds, as is the case in state statute. We also included the health reserve fund, which in the policy had it excluded, but in practice we were always including it. That balance is only about It's not very much money, so we just decided to make it more clear. Deleted the clause related to the extension of maturities on investments. We changed the investment portfolio benchmark. This is a big one. From 90, right now the benchmark was 90-day T-bill rates, regardless of how long our current holdings average maturity was. We were still comparing it with the 90-day rate. So what we're recommending is that we make our benchmark whatever the number of days our current portfolio is right now. So for example, if our portfolio has an average daily maturity of say 400 days, then our benchmark should be what the T-bill rate is for 400 days, for example, or 365 days, for example. So that the maturities are matching between the benchmark and what the T-bill rate is.
And you will be able to get that number how?
You get it from the Wall Street Journal index.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll round it to the nearest quarter.
And are most of the time the average weighted larger than 90 days?
Yes. Yeah, we've been averaging around above 365 days for a number of years. Yeah. Yeah. And lastly, just to kind of clarify the language related to notification of collateral substitution. So kind of just a technical change. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions in committee? Seeing none, any from the public care to address this issue? Seeing none, we will need to take action on this. Move to approve as submitted. Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Roll call.
Gail Townsend
is now exiting.
Bryant.
Aye.
Walters. Aye. Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend. McKiernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my staff for their work on this policy and for all that they do with the investment portfolio.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item 6. Item 6 is a budget revision for the fire station project. And we do have John Kelly, our Director of Buildings and Logistics, will be joined by our Chief, Mr. Callahan. And when you get seated, we'll...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Gail Townsend. This is Commissioner Townsend. I do apologize. Right in the midst of the call for that vote, I had some technical difficulties. This was regarding the cash investment policy, which you needed approval on. I'd like the record to reflect that I was in favor of that action.
Well, it's made. We've made note. Thank you, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, at your convenience.
Commission staff, thank you. I want to tell everybody we have Kyle Morrison with ARC Images here tonight that will show us a few slides. And as you said, we have Chief Callahan and Chief Ingrati. But tonight we're here requesting up to do a budget revision up to $1 million. We are working with the Finance and Budget Department to help find unexpended 2018 CMIP dollars. These additional funds will ensure the basic features and the services that the design committee has been working on up to this point. And also our CMR bids will be coming in February of 19. So with those anticipated numbers is really the reason that we are requesting this budget revision at this time. And I'll let Kyle see, he'll kind of go through the slides here, and then if you guys have any questions, we'll be able to answer them.
Good evening. I'm Kyle Morrison with ARC Images. We've been working with the committee to identify the needs of the fire station and prepare design and do some costing. The location is just south of Leavenworth Road on Hutton Road on the east side. This is our site. North is up on this site. We're planning a drive-through station where trucks will return this way and come in here. I'll show you a floor plan in just a minute. Most of the parking is in the back. There is some public parking and a public entrance in the front. The 4.5 acre site is, we're using just the north part of it, and the balance of the site is reserved for a future city park. That park is not part of this project and not part of what we're talking about this evening. The floor plan, the areas in red are apparatus. These areas in orange are support areas for the apparatus. The decontamination area is down here, gear storage. We have a small mezzanine area with mechanical and some storage up there. The two bays to the left will be a truck and an engine. Initially, probably just the pumper engine, and the truck will be somewhere in the future. This small bay is for an ambulance. The blue in the back is the bunk rooms and a laundry and a study room. And then the green areas are the living spaces. That public entrance that I mentioned is right here. And so we have the living and day room spaces over here, and then a fitness area. And this is what the outside of the station is planned to look like. We've worked towards a long-lasting design that won't be trendy, that will, with low-maintenance materials that'll serve for a long time, trying to minimize operational cost and maintenance expense. Again, we've really worked hard to identify needs and meet those needs, and have worked with the construction manager on what the costs are.
Questions? Committee questions? Questions from the public?
I have a question.
Commissioner Walters.
Did I understand that you don't have these funds identified yet?
That is correct, Commissioner. We're working with budget and finance to look at, like I said, unexpended 2018 dollars that are coming in this last quarter to see what weren't spent to put towards this project.
Can I add to that? So we know that there is significant, as you saw in the earlier presentation, there's significant underspending in the city general fund cash funded capital projects. So we anticipate that these funds will be coming from those line items, but we can't tell you specifically which projects are going to end the year with underspending that's sufficient to meet, but pretty significant difference.
Well, that was my question, is what projects that we have approved are not going to get done if we go forward with this. But I guess we don't know the answer to that at this time, huh?
Not at this time, no.
So just a quick question, is that wood and concrete block that I'm seeing on that rendering?
It's a combination of brick, stucco, and stone. There's no wood on the outside.
What is the brown material?
With the horizontal lines, that's stucco.
Stucco. Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one.
I have a question. I have a question when you're ready.
Go ahead, Commissioner Murguia.
I can't remember, what's the total budget for this building?
Total budget?
Commissioner, the current budget that we have is $4 million.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a timeline for getting this project finished?
currently in the design process. We anticipate being finished with that and out to bid in February, and a 10 to 12 month construction time depending on weather. We'll actually start, we have an early site package going out, it's out right now, and so site grading will start in January.
Okay, so we can see the project completed in 2019?
Late 2019.
Late 2019.
Yes, that's our hopes.
And the hopes of one of my fellow commissioners.
Yes.
Any other questions? Comments from the public?
Commissioner Burrows, I have one last question. Does anyone there happen to remember the cost of the new police station in Argentine?
Commissioner, this is John Kelly, and I'm sorry, not offhand, but I could get that number for you.
Okay, let me know.
Would it be more appropriate to also the cost of the one off State Avenue, the one out by the Schlitterbahn project?
The fire station you're referring to, we could probably get that number as well.
I think that's pretty close to comparable size of what we're looking at here. It may be just a little bit bigger.
Well, size-wise, square footage probably, but like I said, the time of sixes versus the South Patrol are, years apart. But we can get both of those numbers in square footage for the facilities.
Commissioner Bergia, would be a benefit?
Well, I think, Tom, I'm not sure I know when that fire station was built. I think it was over a decade ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or am I thinking of a different station?
On State?
Oh, you're correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
It was
okay, so
2000.
Yeah, the more comparable, I think, well, it was in 2000, that's 18 years ago. So the more comparable, I think, would be the police station in Argentine, which opened, I think, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. My recollection is when we first started talking about fire stations, we were told that a fire station cost roughly $3 million. And then when it got into the CMIP, it was $4 million. Now it's $5 million. So we might have to think about our long-term investment in fire stations, because I think we were talking about $3 million would be the cost of a fire station roughly, but that's clearly not going to be the case.
Yeah, and along with what Commissioner Walters said, I believe the police station, the new police station from a couple years ago, was $2.5 million. So just unless there's a big difference between a fire station and a police station and the needs there, I was just curious why there's a $4 million discrepancy.
Thank you. I believe Chief Callahan can answer that question.
Commissioner, there's, in addition to square footage, there's a lot of considerations that go into a fire station that don't go into a police station, such as decontamination, the way the air, negative and positive pressurization in the rooms, because the bunker gear needs to be separate, and there needs to be negative pressure in the room the bunker gear is stored in because of the cancer hazard. And typically police stations also don't have living quarters in them where they spend the night, and kitchens.
Thank you very much, Chief. That's very helpful, because the question I will get as a commissioner is, why are we spending $2.5 million on public safety in the inner city, and we're spending $4 million out west? I am totally in favor of this fire station. Couldn't be a bigger advocate, but I just want to have an answer for my constituents, and that answers it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I did have a question, one for clarity. Now, thank you. This money is for the station. We're not talking about the addition of equipment, rolling equipment. This is just the edifice itself and what it needs to be nice and safe for our firemen, correct?
That is correct. It's just strictly for the construction of the station.
Okay. And do we anticipate finding capital projects where there will be a $1 million, well, where $1 million will be available to road at this project. I was just trying to understand that again. I think I heard from Commissioner Walters' question that these projects have not been identified yet.
I don't believe that was the comment. I believe it was the identification of where the funds would be coming from.
Well, that's what I mean. We don't. It says here the funds will come from anticipated unexpended 2018 capital projects.
Kathleen Van Etchen will answer that question.
Yeah, that's right. Well, some of it, not all of it, but we're looking for various areas in the city general fund budget where we can identify that underspending in various areas, not just capital projects. That's probably where most of it will come from. If you look at page 2 of the budget report, you'll see that the city general fund cash funded capital projects totals $2.4 million, and so far we've only spent 1.4.
So this is new bonded money.
This is what?
Cash.
This is not new bonded money. This will be a cash investment.
Yeah, cash.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone from the public care to speak to this item?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misread what I meant to. I need to make a correction to what I just said. I looked at the wrong table. So the total amended 2018 budget for capital outlay is $5.3 million, and we've only spent $1.4 million so far. So I looked at the wrong table, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Bryant?
So, I mean, the packet that I received didn't really have much detail. How could we be off by 25% on what our expectations were?
So we've asked the departments to go through, we've.
Cost. Talking about the,
oh, okay, sorry.
4 million and now they need another million. That's, whether you look at it from 5 down, 4 being 20% or 25% to add another million. I'm just curious how we could be so far off on our projection, original projection.
Commissioner, with that being said, the number of 4 million was given a few years back, and I just think that maybe at that time, not knowing as the committee was moving forward with knowing where the fire station was going, knowing this one's out in Piper and the needs out there, that maybe the square footage of that facility for the needs that we need, or maybe a little, and then also with the market now, we're finding a lot of projects that are trending upward, just with a lot of different, costs going up.
I might also offer that a few years, it's been in relatively recent times that the concerns over cancer causing elements have been raised, and I wasn't obviously part of that budgeting process, but I'm not sure that was really considered at the time. So that adds both square footage and equipment to the building to address those in the way that we're addressing them today.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner McKierney?
Move to approve the request as submitted.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve as presented. Clerk will call the roll.
Roll call. Bryant.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. We do have one other item of business before us this evening. It was the item that was put in as a revision to our agenda. It is a new item. It deals with it's a resolution dealing with the First Amendment to the Legends West Lawn Development Agreement.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
On this item, I would just note, earlier this year, the commission approved a community improvement district and development agreement with the WLD Legends owner, which provided that certain improvements to the West Lawn area would be completed by December 31st, 2018. The developer has been working on those improvements, but has requested a brief extension of time for that deadline from us, and that's why this item is before you tonight. I believe the developer has a representative to discuss those improvements and the new timetable.
If that individual would approach the chair, please.
Yeah.
Yes, please. And please, for the matter of record, your name.
One more time.
Thank you. Heather Trower with Legacy Development.
Okay, thank you. Anything you'd like to say in reference to the resolution?
Sure. Our current completion date per the development agreement is 12/31/18. When we started working on these documents over a year ago, that date was put in as our completion date. However, it took several months longer than we had thought to actually get everything completed as far as getting our documents wrapped up and the bond issue. Therefore, the schedule just became very tight. With the Thanksgiving holiday, we didn't want to shut down, access to the public, to the various stores. So we just really think that that extra 3 months would be needed.
So if I may, that's a 1 month or 6 week time period through the holiday season, and you're asking for a 3-month extension.
Correct, because like I said, when that original completion date was put in those documents, which we worked with the UG, we thought the work would be done by December 31st, but we had been working on those documents, over a year ago before we actually finalized the bond issuance and closed on everything. So everything just took a little longer than we had thought.
Okay. Commissioner McKiernan?
If I read the request for action correctly, it's only a 2-month extension. It says March 1st. That's not 3 months.
That's correct.
March
60, yeah, correct, 60 days.
60 days.
60 days, I'm sorry, March 1st.
Thank you for the clarification. Your organization owned the vacant stores that are presently in the Village West development?
We do. Legacy Development is a member of the ownership entity that was mentioned.
Is there, to your knowledge, are there commitments to fill those vacated premises by your organization?
We are working with several tenants right now. My leasing agent and myself were out at the property today, showing to future tenants, and I'll be meeting with another tenant tomorrow at 10:30. So we do have a lot of interest for the remaining vacancies.
Well, the development that is occurring there now, those tenants those vacated areas will be visible to those that want to use the new area. So I would hope that we would be able to find occupants for those vacated facilities. One of them's been vacated for quite a while, and that's revenue that we're missing out on sales tax, having just passed the 3/8 sales tax issue. Those are dollars that are very important to our community and the future development of the Legends as it sits today.
You bet, and it's definitely our goal for the center to be full. We truly believe with all of the improvements that we're making in the West Lawn area that it's going to attract even better tenants to our center. Tenants that typically like to be co-tenants with the likes of Kate Spade and Coach, and Michael Kors. So we feel that once those improvements are complete, that it'll show even better and that we'll bring in those new tenants.
Wonderful, thank you. Commissioner McKiernan?
Yeah, as I recall, that we didn't have a site plan in here to remind me about the initial dispersal of where all of the developments were taking place, but they were kind of scattered. You had the West Lawn where the new TV is, but weren't part of this in other areas of the center? At the east end?
No, it's mainly
all by where the TV is.
By the TV.
What's left? What percent of the project, what's left to be done?
We have to do the escalator work. We're going to have a structure that will enclose it so that it's protected from the various weather conditions, rain.
That work that can reasonably be done in January and February?
Weather permitting, we are told yes, that it can be.
I guess what I'm getting at is 60 days a reasonable time frame for outdoor construction in the Midwest?
I believe this is what the developer agreed to and indicated would be sufficient. If we can revisit it if there's an issue later on, but that was the developer's agreement.
Okay.
Well, getting back to Brian's question, what does remain other than the escalator enclosure?
We're currently doing concrete work in the West Lawn area. Like I said, the escalator. We're doing some restroom updates. It's mainly the concrete, and then we have an artificial turf going down and some, amenities.
I believe there was some metal ironwork, ornamental ironwork to be done to replace some of the deteriorating ironwork that is to go in with the new development.
Correct. Okay. There's the rust.
Commissioner McKiernan?
I'm going to perseverate on this. So we've got some concrete work to be done.
It's currently being done.
Artificial turf, hence the lawn part of West Lawn.
Correct.
And we can put down artificial turf in January? Not we, but.
Permitting.
Yeah. Well, okay. I love the hedge. What's the chances we'll be back here in 2 months extending this again? I get it. Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Motion's been made to approve. The motion been made and seconded to approve as presented. Clerk will call the roll. This is an action item.
Roll call. Bryant?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Murguia?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the agenda for this evening. I thank you for your patience. Staff, thank you for your presentations. We are adjourned.
You're not late, are you, Brian?